getting darker and darker, and there's just no way right now for these drivers to know exactly what's going to happen.
These guys are going to have to be really, really careful and tiptoe around the track until it's either stopped.
And not even 10 minutes into this race, and I feel like we've got enough strategy going on for a whole event, but still a long, long way to go.
There's Yellowstone, there's Yosemite, but for racing fans and for Grid Life's Elkhart Classic, the destination is Road America, the National Park of Speed.
Free ride in the front of the field here. Look at Emil Tab up the inside for the race lead. We head down to the first corner.
And these guys have no idea what they're coming into. Look at this field. They're 2 wide, 3 wide, a couple places slipping.
Side by side for the race lead. 54, 48 through 3 and 4. Working lap number 60, 110 laps to go. Yusuf Ghali, power move to the bottom of the racetrack, making the short way work. They're going to touch down the hill. This will be a great run for Fuller here.
Yeah, if we go right off the track in the final quarter, that'll have Fuller get a massive.
Here he comes.
Does he have a look?
Oh, big block there by Sanfilippo. Into the grass goes Ben Fuller toward turn 1, and Sanfilippo hangs on. He's loose. No! And he crashes hard in the exit of turn number 2.
Don't try here, boys. They're going to do it.
Gritsko backs out. They touch. They're going to crash. Gritsko going to slam the attenuator hard into the wall, and Sharon Tesson hits him as well. And big damage on these cars. That's a huge.
Number 4, people are struggling for grip, going out of every single lane, even trying to then run. It's getting really insane.
Powered by AWS for the Intercontinental GT Challenge, powered by Pirelli at the Indianapolis 8-hour. We are 7 hours and 18 minutes into this 8-hour event. John Miller way deep on the brakes to the inside of turn number 1 and 2. The spin, the 3 car gets turned around in front of the car. James Houghton looking for a place to go, but he's got Austin Cobb to the inside. Into the gap behind. I think that's about 15th or 16th spot as they come out of turn 3. Big slide for this. Getting a run. He's got it. Going to be a drag racing line. Final corner. Checkered flag waving. Here they come. At Virginia National Raceway. To the line. Thompson, Darling, door to door, banging doors, fender to fender. I can't believe what we just saw. The SCRS LazyRocket Prototype Challenge heads to Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course for round number 5 after a trip to the National Park of Speed in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin at Road America. But even though this track is about half as long and has 1 fewer corners, it's going to be just as fast down the back straightaway heading into turn number 4. Welcome to SimTV. My name is Kyle Heyer, joined by Tom O'Gorman tonight for round number 5 of the 2021 SCRS LazyRocket Prototype Challenge. A home track for you, Tom, Mid-Ohio, with some of the fastest cars in North America.
One of my absolute favorite, and I think things summed up pretty quickly, or pretty well by that intro. 1 fewer corners for half the distance. This is a busy place, especially in a Prototype 2 car. These are a little bit of bull in a china shop symptom here at Mid-Ohio, and it's going to make the racing tonight very interesting.
13 corners around here, 2.26 miles, and it all starts with a fast left-hander on the way down to the keyhole here. Tom, take me through a lap.
A very fast left-hander. A lot of aero wash going to be a factor in turn 1. Then the run up the hill towards the keyhole. Lots of line options and line choices leading you onto the back straightaway through that drop in the keyhole. Through turn 3, a slight kink in the back straightaway before we get to the S's. This is the busy section of the track. We call it China Beach there at turn 4. Then up over the left-hander at turn 5. That's madness. Then down the hill to turn 6, under the Honda Bridge at turn 7, cresting the hill, blind at turn 8 before slowing the car down through a really tricky braking zone at turn 9. Another rise before you crest the hill into Thunder Valley. The Dolores screaming through Thunder Valley at turn 10 before finally a lift, maybe a little bit of a break for turn 11, and then another section with a couple of line choices really, especially in qualifying. The Carousel, that's turn 12 before a kink onto the front straightaway at turn 13. And take note, that front straightaway is very short.
It is very short, and it's also where we're going to start the race here tonight. Typically in iRacing, you actually don't start on the back straightaway, and we are not going to do that here tonight. We'll start on the traditional front straightaway for our 2 races here this evening. Again, this is round number 5. Typically, this race follows the LazyRocket Super Trofeo race earlier in the evening. That race got canceled with some technical issues preventing that race from happening. So typically, we've got a full night of action before we even get to the prototype race, but a lot of the drivers, over half of them in fact, haven't gotten that practice in the GT3 car in race conditions. Do you think that's going to affect them in this race tonight?
Well, I think if anything, it's a mental thing where you have a lot of anticipation for that Lamborghini race and a lot of that anticipation going towards the race, and maybe some of the nerves come off in the support race for the Lamborghini Super Trofeo Series, and you can approach this this prototype challenge race with a little bit of a calmer mentality. That didn't happen tonight. If anything, it's amped up because you didn't get the release earlier on. So I know a number of the drivers that share duties in both series are going to have a little bit more pent up in the cockpit of these prototypes tonight.
You'll notice on the left-hand side of the screen that the ticker looks a little bit different here this week. The drivers have been officially separated into their Pro and Am categories. Again, Pro and Am compete together for the overall championship, but there also is an Am battle to keep note of throughout the season. And we're nearing the halfway point now, so we'll start to pay attention to that in the coming weeks. But Paul Darling right now, the quickest driver on track with a 1:12.649. He's been fastest in practice all day long so far. Tom, is Paul the one to beat tonight?
Well, if you ask everybody else, he certainly is. But if you ask him, he would never say so. And something that's interesting here, we talked about line choices in the carousel. You just watched him set up super, super wide coming out of the front straightaway. On his actual flyer, he will not do that. And that's because Mid-Ohio can be manipulated in a couple of ways that is to your advantage. But he looks a little wide there in turn one. And to be honest, this place is really more suited for cars that are at the maybe top of GT category, and certainly in touring car categories, things like that, especially club racing as well. But prototype cars are very busy here, and if you've ever been to your local indoor go-kart track, this feels more like that than it does driving on a proper road course, which is a big adjustment coming from Road America.
Yeah, Road America, you've got huge straightaways between basically turns 14 and 1, 1 and 5, and at the exit of turn 10 all the way down to turn 12 at Canada Corner. Tonight, you've really got two very short straightaways, but this whole back section that Paul Darling is negotiating now is going to disappear very quickly. These cars have a ton of horsepower and a ton of downforce. You're going to be modulating that throttle a lot. Your hands will have to be real quick coming up over these crests. You've got traction control, Tom, but if you're leaning on the traction control, you're not going to be going very fast tonight.
No, and I also think that this is going to be probably the most unique challenge on the schedule for everybody. Paul Darling, just to put a button on that, he has 2 wins in the sprint races, 1 win in a feature race this season, and he sits second in the points championship to DJ Alessandrini, who is at the top, having won a couple of races himself. But there's one of our kind of wild cards, Cy Andra, who is considered by the rest of the field at least to be a specialist in these prototype cars, has been a little bit hit or miss, especially because he's missed qualifying a number of times this season, but is always super fast and will keep everybody on their toes. And you see how that plays out right now as he goes to pole over Paul Darling.
Zach Buchanan up to third at 1:12.747, a tenth and a half off of the front two. That's an impressive time for Buchanan. Here's DJ Alessandrini, current points leader, as you mentioned. He was disappointed that the Lamborghini Super Trofeo race didn't get rolling earlier tonight, and jumping into the prototypes, he found this a little bit frustrating. And I think a lot of the drivers, the sentiment I heard was that this is going to be a challenge tonight, not only to drive, but also to pass. Everything happens so fast here. You've got 2 good passing opportunities into the keyhole and into turn 4. Once you miss those, or you miss that window to make a pass, you're stuck following everybody for the rest of the lap. And you can't even follow that closely because of all the aero wash that these cars push off their big wings.
And that's also just due to the layout of the track, because there are so many transitions and so many changes of direction. Anytime you introduce corners linked together, that really reduces passing opportunities. And what you'll also notice is if cars get side by side, the passing and the racing will get very, very intense for a short period of time. I can guarantee we'll see that at some point throughout the field tonight. Especially in that inverted race, but here in qualifying, I think specifically for the sprint race, this is a really critical moment because passing is going to be so hard, especially at the front. As you see, Alessandrini has just leapfrogged Zach Buchanan to go 3rd and 4th, but the top 4 have not changed really.
Pretty interesting here to see that the top 7 are all our pro category drivers. Now, the way that these classes are selected is basically just by your history, your pace, and your running position at the end of the race. There's really no distinct qualifier for the classes, but I always love how distinctly they separate out. Like oil and water, it seems like in qualifying. In the race, they're going to get shaken up a little bit, I think, and we typically see a little bit more color variation in the order at the end of the race versus the beginning of it. But Eric Brown goes for a big slide at the exit or the entrance to turn 9. We're going to see a lot of that. Miss a mark here, Tom, the margin for error is pretty small around here.
It is, and that's just down to how fast these cars are relative to the size of this racetrack. But while we're talking about the classing, we should mention that the current AM Cup championship leader is Corey Bunch, who is currently qualified in 15th, but leads the way on the points over Ryan Plord. Drew Lidke is 3rd. There in that championship, and those drivers are pretty well spread out. It's actually pretty tight between Bunch and Plord, so that'll be fun to watch those 2 progress. And then it's a massive gap back to Drew Lidke, who we've watched on stream have a number of issues, but that car tends to be very fast. And then Ryan Caldwell and Brian Schabelsky, those 2 are in the top 5, really within striking distance of of Drew Lidke as well. So the AM Championship is going to be fun to watch, even if they aren't in the battle for the top 5.
Having a look here at the track temperature, 75 in the air, 98 on the racetrack. Now, 98 at most racetracks wouldn't be too huge of a concern, but Mid-Ohio is notorious for having a surface that is really low grip, not only in the wet, but even in the dry, and especially at low speeds when the downforce comes off these cars, it's going to be a challenge to hustle around here. So 98 degrees, that temperature is probably going to go up, and it's probably going to get increasingly challenging throughout the day here to keep the cars on course.
And I think something else that's worth noting is that this is a fixed setup series, as has always been, which means the drivers have nothing to adjust past pretty much the brake bias of the car, which means the front brake pressure versus the rear brake pressure. And I've heard that a number of drivers really tonight have made note more than normal to basically complain about the setup not being particularly well suited for Mid-Ohio. They say it's a little too open on the rear diff for low speed corners, so it gets a lot of wheel spin and tends to be a little pushy in the low speed corners. But then really, really snappy on low-speed corner exits as well, and then pushy in high-speed corners as well. So in general, I think everyone's dealing obviously with the same deck of cards. It's not a problem from that perspective, but it's the driver who can adapt to that maybe less than suitable setup for this circuit to succeed tonight.
Having a look at the keys to the race here tonight, aero push, mentioned it briefly. Following in line is going to be a challenge. Frantic hands here, Tom. It gets real busy on that back section. And if your hands are not frantic enough, you might not survive this race. And survival is our third and final key to the race.
And that really comes into play, especially in that feature, which is a 45-minute inverted race, meaning our winner will start back in 25th, and survival is key. The driver that we should really keep an eye on in that race specifically is Carter Kundinger, who's been a massive success in the feature races this year. He's won not one, but 2 of those feature races and has been very successful. Unfortunately, not due to his success in the sprint races, but is always a factor there in those features.
Starting order on the left-hand side of your screen, Cyandra is your pole sitter. He has not yet taken the grid. Paul Darling and Alessandrini and Zach Buchanan making up the rest of the first and second rows. And Hudson and Kundinger, row number 3. Mitch Welker in the 77, row number 4, alongside Jackson Robillard, the first of our AM competitors. Jackson Robillard has been very successful in prototypes across iRacing, so I'd expect to see him do pretty well here. I think I have him actually classed incorrectly. He is actually a pro competitor, so I'll have to fix that. Sean Unterkuffler behind him in the number 9 is an AM competitor in one of those Project 2 liveries. So, first race up, about 15 minutes, 13 laps worth of time. What's the key here, Tom? We're going to invert the majority of the field, but in such a short race, I think we're going to see a lot of chaos because people know it's going to be hard to pass. They want to get spots now.
Sure, and the other thing that happens here is because the run to the green flag is so short, you're going to see the little kink to the carousel and the green flag. Things will get spread out pretty quickly, so I think getting a good start is critical, but also just settling in right now to get yourself a good finish and then focus on that feature race where you have a little more time to breathe and make decisions is the smart move.
SCRS LazyRocket Prototype Challenge from Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course for round number 5 of the season. Watkins Glen in 2 weeks' time. The road course in upstate New York. The highway, the super speedway of road courses. Green flag in the air, though, for Mid-Ohio, and we're racing as Cyandra pulls ahead into turn number 1. Darling Alessandrini for second place. Looked for a spot, couldn't quite get it, grab it just there, but through turn 1, I think most of the field's made it so far successfully. Car off, 23, Thomas Sherman bullies his way back on course. Car spinning, that's Montello in the 24.
Oh, no, it's too beautiful a car to put in the tire wall, but he got away with mostly no damage. Alessandrini lunges up the inside and tries to get the power down. Doesn't work. It slips too much. Darling closes the door for second place. The rest of the field still stringing through. A lot of double file in the back half of the pack through the AM fields. But the top 7 pro cars at least are single filed. No, now an attack from Darling.
Darling up the inside, the blue 155 on the outside. He wants the position away from Cyandra down the hill at the exit of turn 5. Got real close to the edge of the track, but Andra stays ahead.
Yeah, ran out of track on the right side there, and unfortunately he's going to slap back in and lose a little bit of distance to Andra as well. And the other note, we have a lot of aero wash, which we talked about in the keys to the race. Those are not going to be necessarily in effect in these lower speed corners, but turn 1, turn 11, a couple other spots on this track, that aero push is big, and this is turn 11 right here. Watch Darling struggle to put the power down in the front. The grip down in the front, but he doesn't lose much time.
Not too much. He'll stay tucked up within about a car length and a half. Alessandrini third and Kundinger, Buchanan rest of the top 5. Chris Hudson in the 43 back in 6. 1 lap complete. They take off pretty quick here, about a minute and 14 seconds in race trim here, Tom. They're going to click off in a blink of an eye.
Yeah, 13 laps is going to go very, very quickly, which means not a lot of time to make moves. Right now, Paul Darling looks super racy in that 155. That's the dark blue car that we ride on board with. Cyandra protecting for the lead. And he's actually pulled a little bit of a gap for the top two back to Alessandrini. Look at that, a half-second gap, and you can see the Red Bull car is starting to lose touch.
Dominic Dornenberg going around in the keyhole as Darling pulls up to the rear bumper of Syandra. Let's go back and see what happened to Dornenberg. Don't see any damage on this car, but it does look like he has found his way off course on the brakes and ran to the back of the 144. Just a bit of a stack up there, Tom.
These cars don't have ABS, so if you get in too deep, especially if you're playing with the brake bias, you lock the front tire and things can get sloppy. But speaking of sloppy, it looks like the 42 may be holding up the rest of the field. Trying to take a look at who that is. It's Kyle Lamb. Had a number of cars stacked up behind. I don't know if it was necessarily his doing, but a big separation there at 15th on back, and that was a pretty awkward stack up that was dealt with very well for the bottom half of the field.
Carter Kundinger's off at turn number 13. He's found his way off course. Will find his way back on, but just no damage that I can see to that car. Just drove off the side of the racetrack. Cameron Delve and Nicholas Morelli are off in the final corner, and Sherman is looped around at the exit of turn 1, so now the chaos starts to break here on lap number 3. But no major damage to any of these cars, Tom, but they're just so on edge. The second you touch somebody or something, you're going to go around for a loop, but Sherman's stuck here.
It is, and when you have that heightened awareness at the start of the race, it's one thing to survive the first lap, but to maintain that level of attention to what the car's doing underneath you while having cars around you in a racing situation is big. Look at a mistake from Syandra. He opens the door for Paul Darling. He goes to the outside. That's the wrong side, but it's not really going to work for him. Alessandrini tries to show the nose. We have these super fast machines racing super tight here into the Thunder Valley section. And it's not going to work. There's just not enough racetrack.
Who said these guys are going to run single file? They're going to try double wide through the S's, the fastest part of the racetrack. Look at Darling dogging Syandra. I think Andra is a little bit weaker than Darling right now, and that's sort of creating this bottleneck and creating this excitement at the front here. And as soon as that cork blows out the bottle, I think Paul Darling will drive up and away, but we'll see if Alessandrini can keep tucked up right beneath him here.
Well, we know that Andra has a lot of experience in these cars, but not a lot of practice for this combination tonight. So I think it's experience showing that he was able to put that together a lap for qualifying, but it's not necessarily going to mean that he's got the overall race pace to maintain it. Look at Paul Darling setting up nice and wide, getting the power down, and maximizing the exit of this corner. He's also going to be able to maximize the draft and maybe pull back up to the back of Syandra, and I think that's the practice showing versus the experience in just the car, period.
We broadcasted the Spec MX5 Sim Racing Challenge last night from the very same racetrack, and what I saw Paul Darling do was something that everybody did last night to get a run on the leader, which was arc that corner and apex real late. And so the same thing that you do with a momentum low-power race car is the same thing you're going to do in an LMP2 high downforce racing machine. So Darling has sorted that out, and he's making ground up on this leader, but how do you get by him is the next question.
No, and the 155 is certainly the fastest race car on the track. As you can see, he's really gapping Alessandrini, who is in third. Buchanan has fallen far off of this battle in fourth, and still has Hudson, Welker, and Kundinger within touch of that. That's the battle for the pro category. Ryan Plord continues to lead the AM category over Jackson Robillard and Sean Unterkoffler. That's the top 10, but this battle for the lead, I think, is a little hotter than we expected even.
I think so. I thought that they would sort this out relatively quickly and then run single file, but Paul Darling has been making it exciting, and I think there's a driver in the background of this waiting for these front three to start scrapping again. That's Zach Buchanan, and his number 40. Started this race in fourth spot, hasn't gone anywhere. He's lost some ground in the leaders, but I think he's hoping for a little bit of chaos to kind of mix up the pot here a little bit and bring it back to him in fourth here. Ryan Caldwell in the 144 has had an issue. He's around at the exit of turn number 1. Same thing. We've seen this happen a lot. The other thing that'll get you over here is that curbing on the inside apex. A lot of drivers in some of the slower cars will sort of jump up on top of that curb to help the car rotate. These cars are too low to the ground to really do that successfully with.
They really are. And the other thing about this track is it's a little old-fashioned in that it doesn't have pavement or runoff room to accommodate your mistakes. And a lot of tracks that we see this season do have that installed. This is just grass. And as soon as those slick tires touch the grass, you're along for the ride, no matter how little or large the mistake you made or was, I should say. So coming off the track at turn 1 is going to be a big nail in your coffin. But speaking of nail in the coffin, Syandra with a big moment at the apex of the carousel. Paul Darling shows the nose on the inside.
This might be a pass for position here. Andrew was all out of shape through turns 12 and 13. Paul Darling with that jumps on the weakness and takes the lead away. Syandra's going to fight back though hard at the exit of turn 1. You have a run into the keyhole, and Paul Darling does not protect.
Well, last night in the MX5s, we saw the outside actually pay off more for drivers than the inside. And right now, Paul Darling is showing the same thing works here. He drops 2 tires, but maintains the position around the outside of the keyhole. And unfortunately, it's a long way around through the dogleg, but it looks like he's got the run and might shut the door down into the S's.
This is spectacular stuff here. 6 laps into a race at Mid-Ohio. We're drag racing into turn 4. Alessandrini trying to figure out which driver is going to come out of this on top. He's got to make a decision, or one of these drivers has to figure out, are they willing to fall in line? It is not going to be Paul Darling. Here comes Alessandrini. Up drivers left to Syandra as they crest the hill. Darling takes the lead away decisively this time.
Back into nose to tail, and watch the arrow push. Alessandrini has to drop off the back bumper just a little bit of Syandra, but Darling commandingly takes the lead of this race with 8 laps to go. And he has won, again, 2 sprint races in 1 feature so far this season. He's on his way to another, but that mistake from Syandra, a little bit uncharacteristic. Maybe he might be able to rally this one and return the attack.
Look at Zach Buchanan closing up on these front 4. He's actually the quickest car on the racetrack last lap by 0.4 of a second, thanks to them running door-to-door. So he's able to gain a little time. I think he'll lose some now that they've sorted out. Here is Sarah Tessum in the 72 and Colin Daner in the 578, who started this race back in 17th. He's gained 4 spots on his climb.
Well, quickest car on the track is actually Chris Hudson there in 5th, who's been quiet but a contender all season. There he is in the 43. He was the quickest car on the track last time through. He's pretty solitary there in 5th, but if these guys continue to battle at the front like that, all of a sudden this is going to compress down for maybe even the top 7 battling in pro.
There's Jackson Roblard in the 98 on the back of Ryan Plord in the 74. And up over the crest here, Madness in turn number 5. And Sean Unterkofler in the number 9, Derek Ruhlveld in the 38. All line astern here, running the single file game, and it's all the same thing that you do at Sonoma, same thing that you do at other racetracks like this. You take the entire lap to set yourself up for the passing opportunities as Unterkofler runs wide.
Ruhlveld's going to try to take advantage, and yes, Unterkofler slots back in line, which means the battle for AM is down to 2 cars, Ryan Plord versus Jackson Robillard, and they're glued to each other. There's Plord, a big slide off at the carousel. I love these cars because they are so raw, even though they are so mechanically advanced. So much downforce, so much technology in these cars. Yes, there's traction control, no ABS, but the traction control is not there to help you. It's there to save you. And they move around so much. They're so driver-driven.
One thing I just saw Syandra do as he runs wide at the exit of turn 2 is he got in there and basically treated the corner. He drove in really hard and then did a sharp apex right at the center and turned down hard to the exit. Is that better, or is that building up a better run at corner exit than taking a smoother line to apex late instead of treating it as one sharp apex in the middle?
Well, it's building not only your momentum down the straightaway, but it's also minimizing the draft effect that you might get if you're Syandra. So with Darling getting a run onto that back straightaway in that way, it takes longer for the draft to take effect, and anytime you're minimizing that straightaway, it's really not that long of a straightaway. So if he's adding a couple hundred feet or even a couple dozen feet to before that draft kicks in, he's doing himself a favor. So we even saw it last night in the Miatas. If you're leaving the door open on the way into the keyhole, it often pays off down that back straightaway.
Look at Paul Darling made a huge gain the latter half of that lap, gained 0.5 of a second on Syandra across the line now. 5 laps to go this time through, 5 minutes and 58 seconds remaining. And Darling looks to be the favorite here tonight, but we're going to invert a big portion of this field, and then the challenge really mounts how to pass everybody. Darling only had to do it once. Got to do it 15 or 25 times. That's where the challenge really becomes a big one, and I think Paul Darling is going to have to be a little more creative in race number 2.
And that's where our keys to the race point of survival comes in, because he doesn't need to win every single race for the championship here. He's had a strong enough season that he can afford to finish even top 5, maybe even top 10 if it doesn't go his way. This battle, though, is getting hot. Caldwell, or is that Roveld? I'm sorry, Roveld showing the nose on Plord, and Robillard has gotten through for AM.
Yeah, Robillard moves on through. Robillard is actually misclassed on my timing and scoring. He actually is a pro competitor, at least based on the decals on the car, so I'll have to sort that out for next week. But Ryan Plord falls in 9th, and he is your leading AM class competitor. Then Derek Ruhlveld on a charge 4 we mentioned. Syandra now under pressure from DJ Alessandra. Paul Darling's off. He's crashed in turn number 13. From the lead here, Tom, what a disaster.
Unbelievable, and that just tells you how small the margins for error are here. We're going to watch him come through the entry to the carousel, and I bet he's got a tire in the grass when he goes to the brakes, or maybe locks the tire up. No, he just too much speed and carries the car off the track avoids the wall, but is going to drop down to about 7th place on track. And now all of a sudden, Syandra, Alessandrini are seeing themselves a battle for the lead. I don't think they expected this.
I don't think they did. And here's Zach Buchanan licking his lips. He sees the battle starting to form in front of him, and I think he's in the catbird seat right now as they weave down the back straightaway trying to break the draft. I think this is interesting because I think Alessandrini's quicker than Syandra. I don't think Buchanan's quicker than these two, but he doesn't need to be. If they're going to rub and race and knock each other off the racetrack, that's like taking candy from a baby for Buchanan. So ready to launch on these front two as they battle for position. And then right behind Chris Hudson, that 43, you mentioned him earlier, one of the fastest cars on the racetrack. Even faster last time by 0.6 faster than the race leader, Syandra. So that 43 car is also coming from the tail of the field here. And Mitch Welker, another Project 2 car in 5th in the number 77. But all eyes on DJ Alessandrini. And if he can run down Syandra within 3 laps, that's going to be a bit of a tall task to get there and make the pass. Lost a little bit of ground that time, only a couple hundredths. Into the keyhole, the track falls away here, and Buchanan is really coming into his zone, heating up here. He was runner-up last week at Road America, and I think he's ready to rock again here today. Sees the 3 car perhaps as the car to beat, as he usually is, either him, Syandra, or Paul Darling.
Yeah, just looking at standings, Alessandrini has a lead in the championship, but not by much. He swept at Laguna Seca, won the sprint at Long Beach, but doesn't have a lot of feature wins to his name. And I think you really want to focus on those, and it's honestly been Carter Kundinger that's been pretty magic in those features. He somehow ends up in the position to do really well in those. He's in that position again, but look here in the S's, just how physical these cars are. Yes, it's a simulator, but these drivers are working their butts off.
Yeah, one of our keys of the race in the Lamborghini Super Trofeo race that never kicked off tonight was quick hands. And that was Buchanan with real quick hands preventing disaster. There's Cody Meadows. He's had a couple issues up here at the top of the hill at Madness. Another instance where the track falls away, and even the traction control isn't going to save you there if you're too heavy with your right foot. If you're too fast on throttle, you're going to just loop that car around. It'll be easy. Syandra pulling away 2 laps to go here, Tom, and Alessandrini's not been able to take the fight to him. He's also dealing with pressure from that 40 car now.
As far as I can tell, Syandra is setting the fastest lap of the entire race last time through. He improved on his personal best, but the 112.6 that he just did was faster than anybody has gone this entire race. Paul Darling was the closest to that at the 112.7, so all of a sudden the 67, maybe his lack of practice for this specific event is starting to wear off. He's got enough laps on the car to focus on driving it the way he knows it needs to be driven and deal with that. Look at the speed Alessandrini carries through the exit of turn 6, under the Honda Bridge of turn 7, and now into Thunder Valley. Buchanan is stronger in other sections. It must be because these two are ebbing and flowing big time.
Yeah, Buchanan's driving this car on the right rear tire right now. He's definitely hanging it out right now, keeping on Alessandrini and forcing the issue. But we saw Buchanan drive a lot harder out of turn number 6, and Buchanan was a little calmer through there. Lacks confidence maybe to get back on the throttle over that crest under the bridge. I think you really got to be confident what your car is doing to feel like you can really attack that section.
Just listen to the tires protest with the aero wash in turn 1. We have the white flag in the air. Syandra leads the way for the prototype challenge race over DJ Alessandrini, who's producing a nightmare of an aero wake for Zach Buchanan, but Buchanan shows the nose and turns him.
Yeah, got the nose in there, and I think Alessandrini turned across, but that's a tricky one to evaluate there, Tom, from my angle. That typically doesn't. It's got to take another look at this. I don't think this is as cut and dry as maybe it looked.
No, I think you're going to see Alessandrini in the outside lane leave plenty of space to consider showing a nose, but really you have no right to show a nose there. He was kind of cutting back down to the apex. It's a very awkward exchange between the two cars, but Alessandrini was setting up for that slingshot down the back straightaway that we talked about. And now all of a sudden, look at this. Paul Darling back up to 3rd. Mitch Welker, who we haven't talked much about, is in 2nd now. There he is in the maroon 77, but Darling, this is a heck of a salvage.
Yeah, Paul Darling to end up on podium after that big mistake is going to be pretty impressive, but Syandra outlasts and passes Paul Darling, who is in the grass and disabled. Syandra wins the sprint round here in Prototype Challenge round number 5. Mitch Welker 2nd place. What a result for him to come on through to finish 2nd. Then Paul Darling 3rd. Hudson and Buchanan, they were shuffling across the line. Kundinger, Robillard, Plord, Alessandrini comes home in 9th. That's a frustrating end for him. and Sean Untercuffley. But this is not an unprecedented situation, Tom. That keyhole lends itself to that particular kind of assault, and we saw it again there. I think we'll see it happen a couple more times before the night's done.
Hopefully not, but it is definitely possible. But as far as I can see, this is the first win on the season for Cy Andra. Congratulations to him, and in large fashion due to that incident. 4.8 seconds back to Mitch Welker, second place. Quiet but very successful, and then Paul Darling up to third after a early mid-race mistake, I should say. Something to consider, though, after Chris Hudson, Zach Buchanan, and the rest. Allison Drini now inherits the best starting position of any pro driver other than Derek Rohlveld, and that's kind of bad news for the rest of the field.
That's real bad news, and that's the key to the invert here, is that even if your first race is poor, you've got equal chance to make up points in the second race of the day, which we are about to launch into. So Cy Andra, your winner in the sprint round here. Mitch Welker salvaged a second. What a result for Mitch. Started this race in, looks like, 7th spot, so +5 into a podium position. He'll be real happy with that. So a short warm-up period here before we get into our second race. What did we learn? I think at the front, a lot more shuffling than we thought.
Definitely more shuffling than we thought. I think we also learned that it's harder to share this track side by side, or even considering side by side with another car, than we expected. We expected a lot of single file, but we saw a lot of double file that was really awkward and really challenging for a number of drivers, which I think makes this second race even more unpredictable. The key for this is we have 45 minutes to let things pan out. These are endurance racing prototype machines. We have a pit stop involved, and you just have a lot of time to pick your places and be smart about things. So the drivers that are starting towards the back, they have to consider that, yes, it's going to feel frantic. Yes, it's going to feel like high pressure, but you have so much more time to manage this race than the previous.
Lexington, Ohio, a pretty small town. About 5,000 people live in Lexington. Constructed in 1962. This is an old-style road course here, Tom. Not a lot of racetracks get built like this now. The American racetracks tend to feel like they were built kind of with the land instead of cutting through it or just laying on top of it. So this racetrack is old school, and one of the things we saw, especially in lap 3 to 5, was how unforgiving it can be. You mentioned how there's just basically grass everywhere. The good news is that typically the places where you spin, the walls have been pushed away, the exit of turn 1, the exit of turn 4, which we're looking at here. The challenge comes if you get yourself involved in any sort of collision on the backside of the racetrack. That's where things can get a little bit messy. But I don't think we saw any crashes last time, just minor spins and contacts.
Yeah, actually, it was a much cleaner race than I thought was possible. I think the biggest bugaboo was the exit of turn 1. We saw a number of cars early on in the race, towards the back of the pack especially, just kind of drop a tire off that yellow curbing on the exit of turn 1 and spin off towards the inside. I saw at least 3 cars do that. So I think minimizing mistakes is certainly critical for this one, but the hard part is that corner not only is very blind on the way in when you're by yourself, but it's blind when you're behind another car, and it's also the place where the aero wash is most exaggerated because it's the high-speed corner of the track. So it's not a surprise to see that be the place that catches people out.
Let's talk a little bit more about the aero wash, because that's one of those things that we talk about in all sorts of racing, whether it's open wheel or NASCAR or even LMP racing. Basically, when you're following the car in front, it's going to displace a bunch of air that you need on the front of your car to help push it to the ground. The good news, I guess, is in the lower speed corners, that effect sort of goes away, but then you sort of lack the downforce that you would have on those wings anyway. So the low speeds in these cars are really where they get challenging, because you don't have any downforce, and you don't have a lot of mechanical grip necessarily either. These cars are pretty light. They don't press themselves into the ground a whole lot. So I think the slower corners are where the challenges really arise. We saw Paul Darling struggle with turn 13 in particular.
And Mid-Ohio is just a relatively slow track as it is. So that's why I think this track of any in the season is the most unique challenge. Obviously, Daytona is pretty unique because you have that extreme banking. But for the most part, the rest of the tracks that we go to are kind of top-tier tracks that a prototype would be at home at. And here in Mid-Ohio, as I mentioned earlier on in the broadcast, it's more like an indoor go-kart track because of the confines of the track than it is a proper road course in a car like this.
Brian Jabelski getting some practice laps in here before our 45-minute endurance race, inverting the vast majority of the field, and that will put, again, DJ Alessandrini of the pro drivers, the highest driver forward So the interesting note, or at least the high start forward of that group, so the interesting note about that is that's good, yes, for Alessandrini, but the drivers in the back that will have to struggle through that, Paul Darling, he made a mistake leading the race, didn't get winner's points, and now isn't going to have an advantage over either Syandra or DJ Alessandrini. So this is kind of a double whammy for Paul. Didn't get the win, and now he's starting behind him for race 2.
A bit, yes. The thing that I'm most excited about is we just got our 4th unique winner of the season. Everything this entire season, whether it be sprint or feature race, has been won by either Paul Darling, DJ Alessandrini, or Carter Kundinger. Now Syandra is added to that list, but there are 27 starters to this race, and who knows who wins this race, because Mid-Ohio is an outlier in so many ways. I would love to see a 5th winner in a lot of ways coming into this.
I think the chances for that are pretty good. Big thanks to LazyRocket Vinyl for coming on board and sponsoring both the Super Trofeo Series and Prototype Challenge. LazyRocket does everything from stickers to vinyl wraps on race cars and pretty much anything else you could ask them for. If it's got vinyl, LazyRocket can put your design on it and ship it to you. And Anthony's a good guy, so check him out on Instagram and mention SimTV sent you, and he'll probably say, that's cool, and then get you what you need. So Tom's got a bunch of LazyRocket vinyl on his race car. I'm sort of advertising. I'm using you shamelessly to advertise LazyRocket, so sorry. But
that's okay. If you're curious what my car looks like because of how cool LazyRocket made it, my Instagram name is Tomo Racing.
Drop that Instagram.
There you go.
Smash that like button and do other things. Also, what are we doing? Do we know what we're doing livery-wise for 2021? Is that a thing we can talk about yet, or is that fine?
For what?
For you.
For my what?
Your race car.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. All right. Anyway, we're going to carry on here. Starting lineup here is on the left-hand side of the screen for race number 2. It's Nicholas Morelli out front in the 095. Devin Bosch in the number 7 alongside him. Then Thomas Sherman, who had that big spin in turn number 1. He starts in 3rd. Cody Meadows in 4th. Jake Gertzen and Dominic Dornenberg. Row number 3 here. Tom Corey Bunch, Montello 7th and 8th. Then Lamb and Shabelski rounding out the rest of the top 10. To find DJ Alessandrini, you got to look all the way down to 17th place.
Well, keep an eye on Corey Bunch. He was our AM championship leader coming into this round, and he starts all the way up there in the 7th position. That's going to be great for his championship efforts. We also see that both David Bosch and Jake Gertzen will be starting from the back in this race. They will drop to the back of the field, so move everybody up at least 2 positions, and that will be tricky because there's not a lot of track between here and the start of the race for them to make that move. Look at them moving to the back there.
It's going to be really aggressive to get them to the back before we take the green flag. Nicholas Morelli is out front in the 095, and the 04 car of Cody Meadows promoted up to the front row. 33 laps of racing for SCRS LazyRocket Prototype Challenge, going green from Mid-Ohio, and we're racing again. Morelli fires off, but Cody Meadows slots in front as we head into turn number 1. Nice clean run through the first corner. The 93 car of Corey Bunch. Whoa, no trouble. Meadows spins out driver's left, slams into the tire barrier. Was there a touch there maybe on the entrance to turn 2?
Well, the internet thought so, but I think we'll go back into the replay and see that there was not actual physical contact between the 2 cars, and that's heartbreak for Cody Meadows because he had a heck of a start maintaining the outside of turn 13 to get a leap into turn 1 and pick up that position. But here you can see from the blimp, it's going to be a little bit of internet, little bit of internet issues between the 2, and unfortunately, that's such heartbreaking for Cody Meadows. But now things getting sloppy down in the S's. Jackson Robillard dodging is that Rollveld with more cars rejoining the track.
It's a mess over there in China Beach. Cars pulling back on course. Corey Bunch in the 93 behind Dominic Dornenberg over the crest in turn number 9. Here comes Kyle Lamb at the 42. It's chaos up front. Oh no, Montello's off. That's at a very fast part of the racetrack. That car is destroyed. Add the 12 of Brian Shabelski to the list, and it's dramas up front here at Mid-Ohio.
Man, that stinks. 2 for 2 for Montello, and he gets hit again from behind. 2 more cars go off into turn 11 into the tires. This is not uncommon for our inverted races, but things so much tighter here at Mid-Ohio. Things very, very sloppy, and unfortunately a number of drivers with their races ended early on. But look at this, Alessandrini up to 7th, Kundinger up to 8th. A number of our pro drivers are slicing through this field in a big way.
Making short work of it, that's for certain. Oh, he's off. Alessandrini outbreaks himself, locks up the tires, ends up in the gravel at turn number 2 at the keyhole. Dramas for Alessandrini. He will lose spots to Paul Darling and Syandra. And the 72 car tests himself. Buchanan splits the middle 3 wide.
Wow, that was wild for a couple of corners, and Mr. Race 2, Carter Kundinger, is now our lead pro driver. Paul Darling is trying to follow through around the outside of Jackson Robillard. Robillard pinches him to the grass, but leaves him the space. Well managed between two of our pro class drivers. Darling still on the outside. This is going to be tough to hold as they go under the Honda bridge now. Robillard with the position. That's the preferred line coming into the next two corners. Turn 8 and turn 9, and he closes the door. Buchanan tries to go through with him.
Morelli's off course, pulls back on track right in front of him. Whoa, big slide for Paul Darling. This is absolutely frantic out here as everyone scrambles for track position and for grip.
Andra showed the nose for a minute, but thought better of it. Morelli now opens the door for him, and is that Welker going to go through as well? It is. Welker still side by side with Morelli. That was your pole sitter for the race, but things chaotic, very chaotic. Kundinger up to 5th, but these are a bunch of your pro contenders. Darling, Buchanan, Andrew Welker slicing their way through there up into the top 15.
And for third place, here comes Kyle Lamb in the 42 in the Project 2 car up the inside of Dornenberg into the keyhole. Pulls alongside. Might try to run that 913 car a little bit wide, but now we'll have a moment to breathe, maybe just for a moment. Here's Cy Andra on the back of Zach Buchanan, but Paul Darling has been able to pull away from Andra, and that's a gap that he desperately needed to build if he wants to hold him behind him. Here's Lamb up the inside again for third.
You can tell these drivers doing their best to leave each other enough space, but there's just not a lot of space to work with. He loses another position. Up in the front, Thomas Sherman is pretty much checked out, 2.5 seconds almost over Corey Bunch, your AM Championship leader. So those two are getting spread out in a big way. I think, again, you just got to check yourself mentally right now in this race and say, where are we at? How much time do we have? And how patient can I be? Because it doesn't need to be this chaotic in a lot of ways.
They're giving out $5 million at the end of this lap here, Tom. You got to go get it. Up the inside, there is Jackson Robillard following the 74 of Ryan Blort. Eric Brown, Colin Daner scrapping for a spot. Here comes the 0-2 of Kundinger on Dornenberg into turn 1, makes that pass complete.
It's through pretty easily. You can see how just spread out the top two were. Dornenberg now hunting in the back. There was a big slide. Is that Andra with a mistake? Buchanan is through.
Yeah,
they're side by side. Darling around the outside of Robillard, and now Buchanan makes a mistake.
He spins. The keyhole has been troublesome for the 40 car today. Back up in front of them, though. Paul Darling and Jackson Robillard drag racing down the back straightaway. Cones going flying. Don't get those stuck up underneath the car. We've seen that happen before. Welker slams it. So does the 095 Nicholas Morelli. He was our pole sitter. Cohen's still sailing off into turn 4.
Darling picked the outside last lap. He got the inside this lap and picks up the spot over Jackson Robillard. Now Cyandra has to deal with Robillard, who is a pro contender. Don't mind the left side of your screen. That is just inside the top 10, but a number of cars still circulating very, very well who started with really nice inverted positions. Sherman, Bunch, Dornenberg, Lamb, Daner, they're making the most of this one right now, and they're going to make it very hard for these cars charging through the field.
Paul Darling on the attack here on Ryan Plord in that red and purple number 74. Then it's Eric Brown, Colin Daner, Kyle Lamb up the road to get yourself back in the top 5. Still so long to go here, but Paul Darling is running from the drivers behind him. I don't think he's so focused on what's out front. He's focused on what's chasing him down from behind.
See if he can make a move with any of this draft coming up into the keyhole. He shows the nose just to fill the mirrors a bit. A big lockup and a mistake, a car off.
Kyle Lamb, he gathered it back up just in time to keep it on course, but it's going to jumble up the field at the exit of turn 2. Robillard spins and collects the driver. And there's the 095 of Morelli crashed, and so is...
Welker was involved in that one too, but Allison Drini threaded the needle and came through, so he survived up to 11th place for the number 3 car. But Welker and Morelli collected with the incident in Jackson Robillard's number 98. This battle, this is for 7th. Things getting very chaotic.
Oh man, Paul Darling trusting the 74 there. They almost touch. And Ryan Plord, for a moment, disappeared. Cyandra swings around the outside, grabs that spot as well. Now it's only a couple car lengths between Paul Darling and Cyandra. And so Darling is feeling that pressure from behind, and he sees the roadblocks out front, and he's trying to make quick work of them as quick as he can.
These drivers all know that Carter Kundinger has made good in all of the feature races essentially this season. He's got 2 feature race wins, I think 1 sprint race win as well, and his 3rd in the championship. So for those drivers to see on their relative screens that he's up in 3rd is kind of a nightmare. But the other thing you got to consider, there's just so much race left. We're only on lap 6 of 33. There's just a lot of time to breathe, and you got to be able to pick your spots when things happen. Darling now shows the nose on the inside of Lamb.
Oh, man, Andrew almost. Yeah, he almost drove in there and took out Eric Brown. Stomped on the binders just enough to miss it. And Darling was actually in the grass on the entry to the keyhole, kicking up blades of grass on the entry. That's a dangerous thing to kind of lose where your left side tires are. Here comes Brown to retaliate on the inside of turn 4. Can he get the car stopped? He does. Pass. Gets back by Paul Darling here.
Very clean pass. Well done for Eric Brown, but now Darling does the over-under a couple of times, tries to hold the outside. Does he do it? Yes, he does. Somehow completes the pass around the outside of turn 6, under the Honda bridge at turn 7, picks up the position, leaves Syandra high and dry behind Eric Brown, and now this battle for 7th has turned into Syandra stuck in 9th.
I don't think he'll be stuck for very long. We saw how hard he dove off into the keyhole. Big mistake there for Brown. He's wide, and here comes Andrew around the outside. He'll take that position away.
Commanding move to shut that door as well, and keep an eye on the blue car a couple cars back. That's Alessandrini with the yellow nose. He is a little bit more mired after that killer start, a self-induced mistake, lunges up the inside, contact between himself and Plord, shoves Plord out of the way and picks up 11th.
So you got to do what you got to do, and Alessandrini did it. He's up to 10th behind them, battle for position side by side. Hudson and Tessem drag racing down to the keyhole. Buchanan watching from behind after his spin in the keyhole a few laps ago, drives up around the outside of his teammate. We'll try the crossover here at corner exit. Perhaps no, stays in line. And now on the run down to turn 4. Derek Roelveld watching from the behind angle here. Buchanan gets it, 13th.
And those two cars, team cars from Project 2, wouldn't be surprised if that was a little bit cooperative between the two of them. But Buchanan, look at the rotation coming over turn 5, but back at the front, it is Bunch being run down by Carter Kundiger. Thomas Sherman is still checked out at the front of this field, but now a huge amount of pressure from Kundiger on the back of Bunch in the 93.
Yeah, he is definitely all over the back of this 93 car. Working lap number 7 to 33. A long way to go here, but what Kundiger is afraid of perhaps is Sherman getting too far out ahead and not having enough time to run him back down. Remember, there's a pit stop we still have to deal with, but you don't want to give someone a cushion that they can use and use to their advantage later in this race. Alessandrini by Eric Brown into turn 1. Another decisive pass. Paul Darling all over Kyle Lamb here into turn 2.
The good news for the rest of this field is, for the last couple of laps anyway, Thomas Sherman is only lapping in the mid-113s. We've seen cars well into the 112s once they're in clean air. So cars like Kundiger, Darling, Andra, Alessandrini, once they get that clean air, which, that was the two of Kundiger trying to get to that point, they may not have the worst time running down Sherman. Is the point I'm trying to make,
but they got to get sorted out.
He's having a hard time making that pass on Bunch.
Yeah, I think the point is they got to sort it out soon, because if they keep battling back and forth like this, they're not going to go much of anywhere. They continue to lose ground, not only to Sherman, but to the drivers behind that are running them down. Dornenberg in the 913, and also Colin Daner in this 578, who's been stuck behind him a lap or 3. And Daner started in 15th. He's gained 10 spots in this 578 car. Youngster here making moves. Look behind him.
Heck of a charge, but he's got one of the best behind him. Paul Darling showing the nose in the mirrors. It's the blue 155. It's kind of a 3-car stack-up arrow wash through turn 1. Dornenberg has clean air. Doesn't make the most of it, though. Daner with a little bit of a run. Can he make the move up into the keyhole?
Going to have some momentum, but not anything to do it with. Whoa, behind him, huge crash. Kyle Lamb goes sailing into the tire barrier, upside down and tumbling. Syandra miscalculated and just absolutely destroyed the 42 of Kyle Lamb. Wow.
More like a lawn dart down into the keyhole. Somehow Andra misjudged that entry. Maybe Lamb was early on the brakes. We'll take a look and see.
Oh my gosh.
Just a massive punt from Syandra.
He hit him so hard, that probably scared the heck out of both of them. Another look at it here, Tom. I don't think Syandra meant to do that, but
well, certainly not maliciously or anything, but I don't know if he was behind a car that he didn't expect to brake as early as he did or what was going on there, but one of our major factors just picked up his first win of the championship and now finds himself in the gravel trap and back to pit lane.
Just watch this again, this impact. Fully lifts the car up off the ground and then turns it up and over, barrel rolling once and twice, landing on the roof. So that is Kyle Lamb's night done. Carter Kundiger still working over Corey Bunch, passing through the disaster zone that is the keyhole now. And see Dornenberg, Colin Daner, Paul Darling queuing up behind 4th place in the background. Derek Roelveld is heading down pit lane here. Is this early maybe for a pit stop, or is this the time you do it?
It's probably right on the earliest measure that you could pit right now. I think, let's see, 33 laps 10 laps into this race, you might have to fuel save just a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised to start seeing pit stops now or within the next 3 to 5 laps. Especially, I have to think if you're maybe Paul Darling or even Cunding, or if you're stuck there for the next couple of laps, pit as early as you can.
Couple battles going on around the racetrack. Here's Unterkuffler in the yellow number 9 chasing Drew Lidke in the 121, Mitch Welker in that red 77. Almost went for it here, Tom. We see that a lot. Door opens on the inside of 5. You want to go for it, but the hole closes, and it always closes. But good decision to back out of that one. Also, Dornenberg feeling real busy out the mirror here.
He's doing a great job for AOD White, maintaining the point and not really succumbing to the pressure. Big slide for Colin Daner, and Paul Darling snaps to the inside. They're overlapped into turn 1, and Darling will probably take this position pretty easily. Yes, he does. They lose a little bit of time to Dornenberg, but Dornenberg will get run down no time at all, and all of that exchange has brought Alessandrini into the battle. 4-car duel for 4th.
I don't think DJ wastes a whole lot of time. We saw him mean business into turn 1 a few laps ago. Darling a little wide, kicks up some dirt at the exit of turn number 2. And now the run down the long back straightaway, and you see Darling already closing that distance to Dornenberg. And feeling the pressure. I don't know. I mean, it's got so long, but Sherman's still running very quickly at the front. 13.4 last time to compare to Darling's 13.9, so he still is making up ground. Darling has yet to start eating into that race lead.
Just notice how sharp the front end of Darling's car looks relative to Dornenberg, the car in front. When they turn into turn 4, Dornenberg was a very progressive, slow lead into turn 4. Darling was like a light switch. All of a sudden, the car was just turning into turn 4, and that's the difference between a driver that can maximize a downforce car like this and a driver that maybe hasn't figured it out 100% yet. Dornenberg, we know, started up in, 6th position, which means he would have finished about 19th last time through. And he might still be learning things about this car. Darling is an expert at this car as far as we're concerned in this field. And that's the kind of stuff that really stands out to me on camera. But the hard part is Darling still has to figure out a way by. He opens up the entry to the carousel, the keyhole, goes for a late apex, and it will go for the draft down that back straightaway, and I think this time he's got the run.
Yeah, he's going to have this here. He's going to have a huge run. He's going to look to driver's left. That's a conscious decision because of how the next couple corners set you up. If you can carry speed long enough to stay on the outside into turn 5, it's pass complete, and he might have this done before they get to turn 5. Nicely done. Darling is through to P4.
It's bad news for Alessandrini because now Darling has clear air for at least a couple of laps. He's got 5 seconds up to Sherman, Cundinger, and Bunch, which is a massive gap. Cundinger has finally started to run down Sherman. Oh, Alessandrini into the back of Daner.
Gathered it back up. He almost lost the back end in panic on the brakes, but managed to keep that car pointed the right direction. Lost about a half second of time to Colin Daner. We'll have to try that one again here in another minute or so. Dornenberg real wide into the carousel. Oh, and Alessandrini's going to hit pit lane. Smart move there. He realized he was going to get held up. Come pit now. Serve your server stop. Get back out there. Run all the way to the end.
For sure. Making the pass in pit lane is so much easier than making a pass on track, especially considering this is essentially a spec race. All the cars on the same setup. All the cars exactly the same mechanically. Thomas Sherman, though, continues to be the epitome of perfection as far as his race is concerned. He hasn't put a foot wrong anywhere. Started in 3rd, inherited a couple of positions there at the start, and is leading this race by 2.8 seconds and really not losing a massive amount of time per lap to Carter Cundinger, who's here in the 0-2. And again, he's kind of Mr. Feature Race. He wins the feature race based on his starting positions in the sprint races, but kind of a hard time running down Sherman right now.
Yeah, right now Sherman last time by was about a second slower, but that has not been the norm. That's really the exception to the rule so far. Corey Bunch in 30. He's run a quiet day here. He hasn't made a lot of noise, Tom, but points racing I think Corey Bunch is doing, and it's working out pretty well.
Again, your AM championship leader there with the orange number board. Corey Bunch is having another excellent points day, especially considering Ryan Plord and Drew Lidke are his closest competitors. Plord sitting there in 7th. That's going to extend the lead for Bunch by a couple dozen points.
By a bunch, probably.
By a bunch.
Dornenberg and Colin Daner running nose to tail here. They have yet to sort this out. And now with Alessandrini already pitting, I would expect them, when they make their pit stop, to likely come out right behind DJ Alessandrini.
Well, it's a big gamble for someone like Alessandrini, who's in now all the way down to 14th or 15th position. he's basically gambled that he's going to get empty track from pitting behind cars, and he's lucky right now that he does have that, but he's going to be catching other cars pretty quickly. And when you have the pace that this driver does, you can't predict when you come back out onto the racetrack that you're going to have clear racetracks. So it's really tricky for him to have made that decision, but I do agree with the position. As now we watch Daner get a little behind, coming out of the S's, on the back of Dornenberg.
You've talked a lot about how this track links together in a way that other tracks really don't. Places like Road America, you can make a corner, do a corner wrong, and it's fine. It only affects you for that one corner. We saw there that Daner got behind once, and it cost him a whole bunch of time through the rest of that complex.
Yeah, there aren't many road courses in North America that are like that. I think of Mid-Ohio for sure. I think of maybe NCM Motorsports Park and maybe a couple of others here and there, but for the most part, road courses tend to be one, maybe two corners at a time. Mid-Ohio, there's 5 or 6 at a time when you go from turns 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you just got to be exactly on point. And Daner got a little behind. You see the car lengths just grow as Dornenberg starts to pull away just a little bit.
And the other track I'm thinking of is the entire first half of Circuit of the Americas.
Yes.
You get behind there, and that's a long, frustrating way.
Yep.
It almost feels like you can't recover. Once you make that mistake, you just throw away the lap because there's no way you can make that time back. And if you try, you're going to make more mistakes.
And Sonoma as well. There's very few of them, but I love the characteristic of that track. They don't necessarily make for the best side-by-side racing all the time, but they are certainly drivers' tracks, and right now the drivers are shining, who have had good, consistent races.
Calvert Dynamics on the side of this number 578. Whoop, disappeared for a moment. He'll be right back in and pops right back in behind Dominic Dornenberg. A little bit of hacks there, I think, pulling in behind that 913. This battle continues for 5th spot. Darling up the road, closing in on Corey Bunch.
He's closed in by about 2 seconds total on Sherman, which is maybe a second and a half on Bunch. Now he's on the back bumper, essentially. He's within the aero wash zone, so he's got to be a little bit careful, but Darling is looking pretty strong right now. Kundinger taking his time running down Sherman, and he's not taking his time by accident. I'm sorry, by purpose. But now a race for 3rd.
Corey Bunch. I'm not sure if Corey Bunch is even going to bother here. Think about his position right now, leading the AM Championship. Is it worth trying to save a point in the overall championship, or making sure that you maintain in the AM Cup standings? I think right now his focus will be on the AM Cup standings, but maybe there's a bigger picture there.
It's hard to say whether or not a driver really considers that, or whether they come into the race just trying to do their best. If he has looked at the standings, he would know that Thomas Sherman is sitting about 15th in the AM standings and is really not a factor in that championship. So he might be able to kind of concede this position without much heartburn, but he also is in a podium position, and giving up a bronze medal is kind of challenging when you have the option not to.
So Paul Darling feeling the aerodynamic effects off the lead car of the 93. I would have thought he would have come to pit lane, but there is some clear track in front of Corey Bunch. Get this car done, and then have some clear racetrack to play with.
In my opinion, if he doesn't get by on this lap, whoa, who was that? Was that Kundinger? Kundinger makes a mistake himself as well.
Wow. Loses control of the car at the exit at turn number 1. Got up on top of the curb, too aggressive, trying to make up time there, Tom. That's a curb you can use in a lot of race cars, but certainly not a prototype.
No, you need a nice, compliant, soft race car to make that work, and Kundinger drops all the way down to 8th now with that big mistake. And I was going to say, I think Darling needed to make the position change this lap, and he has done so. Look, he's now in front of Corey Bunch and has only 3.8 seconds to make the move to run down, I should say, Thomas Sherman up in the lead. So Darling, I think, will stay out as long as he possibly can, as long as he has clean racetrack as well. Syandra, interestingly enough, has rejoined the battle for where he likely should have been, albeit a lap down. They're in 19th.
Yeah, day didn't go the way he wanted after completely obliterating the back of Kyle Lamb into the keyhole, and obviously an unintentional mistake there, but a big one. That would I can only imagine in the real world how much of a mess that would have been. Thomas Sherman pulls down pit lane from the race lead, and Paul Darling inherits it. So the driver that has led the majority of the laps so far comes on in for his stop at roughly the halfway point here.
Not only led the majority of laps, but has the fastest lap last time through and the fastest lap of the entire race at a 112.3, which is essentially qualifying pole pace. So Paul Darling has a point to prove in this one. As far as I'm concerned, that 155 is going to be really tough to beat, especially considering his tightest competitors have made big mistakes, not only Syandra, but also Allison Greeny, as we watch Jack Buchanan have a big moment coming out of the keyhole.
What was one of their keys to the race? Frantic hands?
Frantic hands and survival.
Yeah.
It's kind of 2 in 1 right there.
And Buchanan's been doing both today. Struggling with the on-throttle performance of this car today, but he's making time for sure, trying to do the best that he can. With the exorbitant power that you have with an LMP2, more than you need probably for Mid-Ohio.
Ooh, Plord almost running wide off of turn 6 into turn 7. And Buchanan's going to close down that gap just a little bit, but Plord holding down the top 5 well, trying to get himself up into the battle with Dornenberg and Daner, who have been going at it the entire race. Darling continues to lead by merit of a pit stop early on from Thomas Sherman, but I think on raw pace, last time through, Darling, again, super quick. Just on pace, I think by the time pit stop cycle through, Darling will be the obvious leader.
Zach Buchanan hits pit lane, Ryan Plord hits pit lane. Yeah, Darling ran a 1:12.6, which is unbelievably fast. He's the only driver other than Cyandro to be in the 1:12s at all this race. I think we could probably add Alessandrini to that list. Where is Alessandrini? Yes.
Down at 13th, and he has run a 12. He continues to lap kind of by himself right now, but he's just now catching what was the leader before the pit stop cycled out. Look at that. Sherman is just in front of Alessandrini, and now is the real problem with Alessandrini is he's gambled on pitting early, and he's going to have to start working his way through traffic pretty early on as well.
Battle for third still continuing between Dornenberg and Daner. Carter Kundinger trying to recover from his spin he had a couple laps ago. And we've seen the leader have issues a couple times tonight. And in the past, it seems like being up front has been a challenging place. Not only in recent weeks for this series, but in recent days on SimTV. Being the leader has not been the place to be. A lot of issues and mistakes up front. Dornenberg has done a real good job covering here on the entrance to the carousel, not leaving Daner an opportunity to sneak up the inside.
I will say Daner is doing an excellent job following as closely as he is, considering the aero wash off of the back of these cars. That number 578 is really doing a good job just keeping the pressure on Dornenberg. Look at them. Yeah, it washes a little bit wide, of course, because of that aero wash, but in general has been pretty much glued to the rear bumper of Corey Bunch anytime we've come to these battle between these two cars. So that is a very interesting battle between our AM Championship leader and a hot shoe for sure. I'm sorry, Dornenberg is not. I got the cars confused. Dornenberg and Daner. But
Paul Darling, sorry to cut you off there, 1:12.527. That was even quicker than his previous lap, so he's getting faster and faster and faster as the fuel burns off. And that tells me he's probably going to stay out on the racetrack as long as he can and run the quickest laps that he can. And if he starts sensing any drop-off in tire, he's going to hit pit lane. But I think this car is going to continue to get faster throughout the rest of this
Yeah, it'll certainly get faster and faster. I think he pits as soon as he catches lap traffic or as soon as he runs out of fuel, one of the two. And right now, as far as I can tell, he's not in danger of catching lap traffic within at least another lap, maybe. So perhaps next time through, we might see the 155 on pit lane. I was also paying attention to Alessandrini. He's dealing with traffic in a really painful way right now. So while I do agree with the early pit stop, the number 3 car is dealing with the consequences of that mistake that we saw early on.
Carter Kundinger sighting up Colin Daner and Dornenberg here. This would be for third. Nobody in the top 9 has made their pit stop yet. So all these drivers have to come to pit lane. Kundinger way late on the brakes. Too late. They're going to tag the back of Daner and go off track. I think they went in there so slow that because they were battling it, caught Kundinger way by surprise.
Lucky that he was the only car involved really in the consequences of that. I'm sure Daner felt it, but didn't lose a lot of time to Dornenberg. And now we're watching the battle between Sarah Tessum and Mitch Welker, a couple of Project 2 drivers battling for honors down into trying to beach in contact between the two. They're both going to go around.
That's not what you want to see there, Tom. Oh no! And that was, who was that just came across the racetrack and ran into Sarah Tessum and or Mitch Welker as they collided down in turn number 4. Watch the 72. Was it the 7 car? Yes, Devin Bosch. Not really anywhere he could go. The 121. Drew Lidke running in 7th, but this is just, this happens from time to time, making mistakes and getting into your teammate there, Tom, but of all the cars to run into, it's not the ones with the similar liveries.
And you look at the back straightaway here, it's long and it's fast, but turn 4 is also very fast into the S's, so it's tempting to show the nose, but the braking zone there is not all that heavy a braking zone, and it's not all that long of a braking zone, so Mitch Welker might have thought he had plenty of time to make that pass complete, but Sarah Tessum thought otherwise and turned in for the normal corner. And unfortunately, the interaction between the two ended in heartache for both of them, but Paul Darling continues to build his lead as he's circulating in the 112s, one of the only cars to have turned, in fact, the only car to have turned a 112 last time through. And this is just heaven for him because he's building the lead all the way through the rest of this stint.
So interesting to note that DJ Alessandrini's pit delta from pit in to pit out was 29.4 seconds. Paul Darling is now 32 seconds in front of DJ Alessandrini. So as soon as Paul hits pit lane, it's basically 30 seconds guaranteed to spend on the pit lane area. That's not including the entrance road and the exit road as well. So this is going to be very close between Darling and Alessandrini when they cycle back. Now, Darling is pitting later, can take a little less fuel.
Yes, certainly the case. Doing the mental math, I think our first pit stop was at lap 10. Maybe lap 11, and we have 11 laps to go right now. So I would expect to see Paul Darling on pit lane, if not this time, next time through across that start-finish line. Corey Bunch finally hits the pit lane after a very strong start to this race. He will obviously tumble down the order just a little bit, but the number 93 car is probably in a position to extend his lead in the AM Championship.
So Paul Darling leads this race, spun out of the lead in the sprint round earlier in the night, and his week. About last night in the Spec MX5 Sim Racing Challenge, it just did not go well. And I think a victory would be real good for Paul Darling at this point in the week. But now he just needs to drive the heck out of this car, come down pit lane, and then drive the heck out of it and make sure that it comes home and blows up across the finish line. Don't leave anything out there on the table. Chris Hudson and Dominic Dornenberg trading spots here. This is real tight and twisty at the exit of turn 6. Pass complete. So coming to 10 to go, Darling will stay out yet another lap.
It's just getting faster and faster. He was a 112.6 last time through. This time across the start-finish line, a 112.5. His fastest lap of the race was a 112.3 much earlier in the running. But if he's in clear air, just keep cranking him out, man. You might as well, because the car will only get faster the less fuel is in it. Yes, you got to fill it a little longer on pit lane, but it's an important time.
Carter Kundinger in the 0-2 hits pit lane from 4th. The drivers that was running up front a little earlier in the night. There's DJ Alessandrini coming across the line. He's done pitting and now just has to run to the end. He's promoted himself up into 3rd place, but that's the worst he's going to finish is 3rd, likely 2nd or maybe 1st if Darling has a mistake or spends a little longer on pit lane than we're anticipating. But as it stands, Darling should come out of pit lane in front, but it's only to be by a couple car lengths.
Mathematically, Darling will come out in front. Hudson will not. So Alessandrini is likely up to 2nd place on just mathematics of racing and pit stops here. But Chris Hudson also having a great run of it. And Thomas Sherman really making the most of the front starting position that he had. Take a ride on board. I think, I'm almost certain Paul Darling will have to pit this lap, so this might be his very last lap through on this tank fuel.
Speed's climbing here, 160 going into the keyhole. That's a whole bunch. We'll see if he'll do the same on the run down to turn number 4. I'm curious what the VMAX is on one of these cars going off into the keyhole area. This is probably not the fastest these cars could do. Again, we're on a fixed setup that probably locks these cars down a little bit. 160. 170 we're seeing. 172 I had going off into turn number 4. That's a lot of speed for Mid-Ohio.
A lot of speed. This is, again, just such a small track for such a fast car. I'm going to keep super close tabs on whether or not Paul Darling pits this lap. The gap between himself and Alessandrini right now, 32.9 seconds. Alessandrini has been slower every single lap for Darling than Darling for the last 3 or 4 laps that I've taken note of. So I totally think that Alessandrini will not be in front of Darling this time through. Does he pit though? Yes.
Yes, here he comes into pit road, and last time by here in a 112.379, only a couple hundredths off of the best time that he's run today. Alessandrini all the way down in turn number 6. It's crazy to me that he's half a lap away, but is going to be synced back up after 30 seconds on pit lane. These cars are so fast around Mid-Ohio. No other major battles happening at the moment, so we're going to focus on the potential battle up front. Darling leaves the box, only spent 9.5 seconds in pit lane, and rolls down pit road. It's going to feel so slow. Alessandrini coming into the carousel. This isn't going to be all that close here, Tom. I think he's planned that perfectly, and he's going to drive away.
Yeah, he's really made the most of such a challenging sprint race, and will come out close to the tune of 7.5 seconds to Alessandrini, which is absolutely not enough time. With only 8 laps to go, being a second and a half faster than Paul Darling every single lap for the rest of this race, not going to happen.
No, it's down to about 7 after everything's sort of completely cycled. But Paul Darling has played this race the right way. Now you just hope that he took enough fuel, but I imagine that's not a mistake Paul Darling would make at this point. Hopefully I don't jinx him for that. Spent 29.1 seconds on pit lane. Alessandrini 29.4, so it's 0.3 better on the in and out portion of that pit stop sequence. Eric Brown also out. He was the last holdout, so everybody has now made their pit stops and we can run to the end. High attrition rate here. We started this race with 27 cars and only 18 remain on the racetrack, but I think we maybe sort of expected that.
Just with the small margins that are here at Mid-Ohio, I think I agree that it's just kind of natural for more mistakes to have happened and more collections to have happened. Cars bouncing across the track here and there, but the drivers who have impressed me, certainly Paul Darling, but Corey Bunch really making the most of his starting position. He started in the 7th spot. Thomas Sherman starting in the 3rd spot, continues to run 3rd. Both of those drivers doing a fantastic job making the most of their invert and holding on to their spots.
Yeah, doing a nice job today. And Zach Buchanan as well. We've seen him really wrench around the wheel today. He's been driving it. I bet you he's sweating and working real hard right now. As he started 21st, running 5th. So this is a great climb for Zach. And after the way the sprint round went when he had contact with Alessandrini, I think he massively regrets that. He had a funny emoji posted in the Discord chat after that race, so he was disappointed, to say the least, but I think he'll be okay with the top 5. Love the way these cars scream off into the corner. I can't believe they're V8s. They don't sound like V8s at all, but they are, and they're fast.
Things spread out pretty well, but this is a nice battle between Roelveld and Dornenberg. Dornenberg, who has had a very, very interesting day, gets maybe a little bit of net code. I think I almost saw contact, which wasn't merited, but watch as Roelveld holds the inside lane up the inside. Nope, completely on his own. A little bit of snap rotation on the back of Dornenberg's car. The 913 goes into the concrete lightly, but will maintain the position over Drew Lidke.
I just have to point out that this is such a line-sensitive racetrack. There's a big buildup of marbles here on the edge of the racing surface. Now, typically in iRacing, it's not a huge deal, but these cars, at least in my experience in the 24, were really sensitive to marbles when you got offline. And you even see them up at the top of the screen here in turn number 4. You get off this line and into this dirty stuff, it's not going to help you, that's for sure. Drew Lidke, Colin Daner. This is for 11th spot. Colin Daner not running quite as well as he was earlier, but still putting on a pretty valiant effort. A little late on the apex there to turn 1. That's been hurting him a bit down the straightaway into the keyhole, but Daner's had a nice day so far, has kept it clean. 15th to 12th, all he can ask is for a positive delta, right, Tom?
For sure, and he's got one more position in his sights. That is Drew Lidke there in the 11th spot, the black and neon yellow car in front. The other close battle is Sherman and Bunch for 3rd. That is not completely decided yet, less than a second between, or a second and a half between the two. But I do think that Sherman might be a little bit quicker right now.
Keeping an eye on that battle for position for 3rd. And both of those, again, in the AM category. But you see what I mean? At the beginning of this broadcast, we mentioned how the starts of these events always end up being fairly cut and dry like oil and water in terms of classification. You see Prundinger go by Plord for 5th, or 6th rather. But now look here. It's pro, am, pro, am, pro. It's just all over the place, and that's the way things settle out. As here comes the 43 up the inside of the 74. That was almost a touch. Now a drag race down the backstretch. This track lends itself. Ooh, is there a touch there down the back straightaway? The track lends itself to these great battles in this middle sector, where you end up kind of daring each other to go deeper into turn 4, and because the track and banking sort of falls away at the apex, if you miss your braking point, it penalizes you. And while sometimes you want to be on driver's left in turn 4, you don't want to be the ball. Sometimes you want to be the bat.
For sure, and that's just what makes Mid-Ohio so exciting from a sports car racing perspective. It's just so much more unpredictable in so many ways. There's so many more options. And less obvious options than I think exist at a place like Road America, like you mentioned, where you get one corner at a time, and obviously you want the inside versus the outside, et cetera, et cetera. Here you got to think about the consequences 6 or 7 corners up the road.
The consequences.
Yeah.
There's Colin Daner. just got by Drew Lidke in the 121. Sarah Tessum driving back forward. Now remember, the 121 and 72 had some contact at the exit of turn 4 after Tessum got turned by her teammate Mitch Welker. A little bit of damage to that 121. Could be hurting them though. Those dive planes on the nose are fairly important to the overall downforce level of the car, and I imagine they took quite the beating running into the side of a stationary car a couple laps ago.
Tessum looks strong though, closing up to the back of Lidke, coming through turn 13, and then you see the aero wash at turn 1, loses that distance, but how much faster Colin Daner is. Just checked out over a second up the road now as he gets a nice clean run through the keyhole, and he's not really in any real position to pick up any more spots as it's close to 10 seconds up the road to Dornenberg, but still impressive to show that pace this late in the race.
And Tessum with a lot of speed on the back straightaway. You see the damage on the nose of that 121. I do think it is impacting him here as he comes around, and the camera changes angles here in a moment. We'll show you what I'm talking about, but it's I think it's hurting not only his downforce level, but also the top speed in that car. He comes over the crest, and this right front area, I believe, has some scrapes and scratches on it, which don't look like a whole lot. These cars...
oh, yeah, you can see the grimace there. The car has just got a lot of under tray damage on the front end, and that's going to significantly reduce the downforce on the wrong end of the car as far as I'm concerned for this track. You want front end grip for this track, more so than you want rear end grip, and I think Lidke's dealing with kind of a nightmare right now.
Yeah, and these cars don't show damage all that well. If you manage to get visual damage on the nose of these things, the car's destroyed. I mean, they're pretty resilient up until when they show damage, and then that's pretty much lights out and away you go. The LMP1s are like that in iRacing too. They just don't show a lot of damage, but they're very sensitive to it once you get it.
Thomas Sherman and Corey Bunch are continuing to lap within the same 100th of each other. There is the visual between the two of them. Yes, it's not all that tight, but this is so intense for third place. Thomas Sherman maintains the point there in third, but any small mistake and these two drivers are going to come together very, very quickly. And again, for the last 4 laps that I've watched them come across the start-finish line, they have been within the same 10th and often within the same 100th of each other. It's just very, very, very tight for the top of AM honors here at Mid-Ohio.
Yeah, Sherman last time a 113.351 to a 113.384 for Corey Bunch. That's just so close. At the front of the field, Paul Darling had picked up 2 laps to go. Next time by will be shown the white flag, and that will be a sigh of relief when he sees the checkers about 2¼ miles later. And Drew Lidke and Sarah Tessum, they still have not sorted this one out. Lidke has a bit of a bobble, and Tessum trying to run him down. This is the only other close battle on the racetrack at the moment. So 11.2 seconds between Darling and Alessandrini. Darling has just been driving away, and doesn't have to, but I think he's trying to put the cap on this week and call it a win at this point.
I'm also going to keep an eye on Zach Buchanan, who is faster than Sherman and Bunch. Buchanan there in the 40 car, he's got quite a ways to go for this coming to the white flag, but he's not completely out of touch for a top 4. Well, now he might be, as we say, commentators curse. Loses the back end coming into the carousel and loses all the time that he had started to make up.
He made a heck of a show out of it today, though. He was driving that car on the rear tires. I don't know if they're allowed to drift around here at Mid-Ohio, but I think Buchanan is signed up for it regardless. Darling into turn 4. This is the last lap for the 155. Bit of redemption after making that mistake, but think of what could have been, Tom. How much do you think this race would have looked different had Paul Darling won that first race? Do you think he still would have gotten here?
It's unpredictable because of that invert, but all I know is that Darling, he won the sprint race at Daytona, he won the sprint race at Road America, and he won the feature at Long Beach. So he's got, coming to the checkered flag here right now as it sits, he's got 2 sprints and 2 features to his name, and that is the best finishing result of any driver this entire season. So Paul Darling coming to the checkered flag right now, he's just done a fantastic job in the midpoint of this championship.
Paul Darling wins the feature race here at Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course for SCRS LazyRocket Prototype Challenge. DJ Alessandrini 11.5 seconds back will bring it home in second, then Thomas Sherman third. Up on the podium in the AM category in the number 23. Congratulations. In 2 weeks' time, we'll be heading to Watkins Glen, New York for the Superhighway of Speed up in the Seneca Lake area of New York. And that'll be a much different looking race, I think. But all the way to the checkers. Hello, Carter Kundinger. I think it's almost like he knew the camera was there. took that one out. That'll cost you 50 grand in virtual cash. Rolls it over. Still some battles going on here. Here's Drew Lidke and Sarah Tessem into the final corner. And wrapping up the prototype challenge race here at the very end. Lidke 12th, Tessem in 13th across the line. Paul Darling, though, victorious in the feature race, does it again. One win in each of the rounds that we've done this season. So with that, we're going to have a look here at our race results. And Paul Darling takes home the victory. DJ Alessandrini in second, Thomas Sherman third, Corey Bunch. Buchanan wraps up a top 5. Kundinger, Hudson, Plord, Rolveld, and Dominic Dornenberg, the rest of the top 10. Then it's Colin Daner in the 578, Drew Lidke, Sarah Tessem, Cy Andra 14th in this one after contact in the crash early in the going. Eric Brown in 15th, Montello, Robillard, Shabelski, a handful of others here. Mitch Welker after contact with his teammate ending up in 19th place. In a moment, we'll talk to them. So, one more time, Corey Bunch just outside of the podium in 4th place. Thomas Sherman brings home a podium. We're going to talk to them here in just a minute, Tom, but your final thoughts on the LazyRocket Prototype Challenge from Mid-Ohio. That was a wild one, maybe a little unpredictable there towards the end, but Paul Darling gets another victory, and in the points picture, he's looking pretty good.
Well, and Paul just continues to prove that he's the one to be afraid of. Everybody will always say that, other than Paul, as far as we're concerned within personal circles and talking to each other. But I think this is not necessarily a massive surprise. Looking at the championship listing here of the tracks we go to, Mid-Ohio, with maybe the exception of Long Beach and Laguna Seca, is kind of an outlier with just the layout of the track and the way these cars will race on it. But now we look towards Watkins Glen, Road Atlanta, and then we go international for Monza, Spa, and Le Mans. And that will be very much more natural for these cars as they race together.
Back at home for the LMP2s in a couple weeks here. Cy Andra finished 14th in the feature, won the quick race at the beginning of the night, Cy, and then it all sort of went downhill in race number 2. Take us through your night on a victory, and then the fight from the back in 14th.
Yeah, first, before I start, I want to have a massive apology to Kyle, because that was bad. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I think I just had maximum brain fade or something, because I braked way too late to ever have a hope of making that corner. And yeah, I have no explanation for it. So sorry, Kyle, that's my fault. But as for the race, I thought I had good pace considering I didn't have much preparation compared to Paul. He did a league race here before. So I was happy I could keep up with him, and he had a lot of pace. Once he got by me, you could see he was starting to pull. And same thing in the featured race. So I think maybe the best I could have hoped for was second had I not had that accident.
Well, looking forward to Watkins Glen here in a couple weeks. That's a track where these cars, a bit more of a European-style racetrack, a little bit faster, a little bit higher downforce corners, and more places to stretch the legs a little bit. After the Titan Twisties in Mid-Ohio, is that something you're looking forward to, or did you enjoy the challenge of the very single-file Mid-Ohio sports car course?
Yes and no, with the caveat that Mid-Ohio is a fun track, and I have nothing against it as a track itself. But I just don't think this setup suited this track at all. Just the way you had to put the power down. I think a lot of people are struggling with it as well, because it felt like I was driving an open diff Miata with 500 horsepower sometimes off these corners. So hopefully with the more appropriate setup, it'll be more fun next week.
All right, Sandra, 1st and 14th of the 2 races. Congratulations. We'll see you at the Glen in 2 weeks' time.
Sorry, Kyle.
All right, we'll move on now to Thomas Sherman. I thought you signed me. I go, what do you have to be sorry about? Thomas Sherman finishes in 3rd, highest running AM driver in race number 2. Thomas, hey, congratulations. Strong effort there, holding off Corey Bunch at the end for a podium. Take us through your night in both races.
Well, the first race was, I felt pretty good coming out of the qualifying, found a little bit more pace, and then I just messed up in turn 1 a lot, and, just drove really fast, just kind of angry because I messed up, and being in the clean air in the back, I kind of figured how to drive a little bit better on that track, getting a little more laps in. And then once the invert happened, getting up front and starting up front, just, being able to build a little bit of a gap helped me out. I was pushing really hard at the end to try to get on the podium, and it worked out.
It really did work out. Third place here tonight at Mid-Ohio. It was a challenge for a lot of the drivers deeper in the field, but in a couple weeks we head to Watkins Glen. A lot faster, a lot higher downforce corners. Your thoughts on the Glen, and do you think you can pull out a victory out there?
Watkins Glen isn't really my best track, but I'll be doing a lot of practice hopefully for that one, and hopefully have the same result as like tonight.
All right, Thomas Sherman, P3 podium. Bronze medal for the 23 in race number 2. Hey, Thomas, thanks for talking. We'll see you at the Glen.
That's the problem. Take care.
Move on to DJ Alessandrini. Hey, DJ, you got at least one driver that agrees with you that these cars drive like Miatas. That's Syandra, said it drives like a 500 horsepower Miata with an open diff. Your thoughts on the car and your drives tonight?
Oh, man, I'm not too happy with how I drove tonight. I know I got a second there, but honestly, I think I'm just really dialed into the Lamborghini for Bathurst. So P2 is just a huge departure from that. So I was just trying to keep it together as much as I could. And Mid-Ohio kind of feels like a weird time warp where time seems like it goes forever, and the race was never ending. But as far as it driving like Miatas, if you're within a half second, they kind of draft like a Miata, but after that, I would say they don't drive like a Miata.
And that's why you don't like it. I'm just kidding. Second place, though, DJ. Hey, congratulations. The Glen in 2 weeks. You looking forward to the WGI out there?
Yeah, I think Watkins Glen will be a lot of fun in the P2s, and looking forward to the Lambo race there as well.
Sad that the Lamborghini race didn't happen, I'm sure. But DJ, best of luck to you in both those races in 2 weeks. We'll see you there.
All right. Thanks, Kyle.
Yep. Moving on to Paul Darling. Got one in the hole at the end of the race. Paul, you finally managed to pull out a victory after race 1. Had a bit of a scramble there in turn 13, lost it, but fought back pretty hard and decisively won race number 2. Take us through it.
Just being an incompetent buffoon in the first heat, throwing myself off the track. At the end of that last heat was very interesting. I hope you guys enjoyed watching that, because I got a miracle and got my way back up to third, which put me at the back again. But it was a lot of fun working through the field this time.
At the beginning of the night, there was a lot of drivers that were apprehensive about a track like this and a car like this being paired together. From your perspective, driving through the field, how was it? And are the bigger tracks coming up on the schedule places you're looking forward to a bit more?
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm definitely looking forward to something not as small as Mid-Ohio, because you're just off the throttle the whole time and you're just waiting and waiting, and you never feel like you're able to actually use the car for what it's meant for. So I'm looking forward to getting back onto a bigger track.
Tom is holding back a sneeze, and he did it nicely. Good job, Tom. Hey, Paul, congratulations. P1 in race 2. Best of luck to you at Watkins Glen in a couple weeks.
Thank you very much, and bless you, Tom.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, Tom, final thoughts now that you've relaxed. I got to get those mute buttons so you can do that. Anyway.
I feel so bad.
It's fine. It's good. It's all good. Mid-Ohio Sports Car Course, Tom, your thoughts. Fun race.
Well, I think we have a little bit more of a predictable and natural rounds for the rest of the season, but also outside of Syandra's sprint race win tonight, we have the same 3 drivers who have won every round this week, this championship. We have DJ Alessandrini, we have Paul Darling, and we have Carter Kundinger. They have won every single sprint and feature race this season. The biggest question for me is going to be whether or not they can continue to sweep the rounds like this, or whether there will be somebody that can come kind of spoil their parade.
Come shake the tree and drop some apples out of it. We'll see you at the Watkins Glen in 2 weeks' time. Stay tuned for information on the makeup race for the Lamborghini Super Trofeo event that did not happen tonight. And next thing you're going to see on Sim TV is going to be on Saturday Night Outsider Racing League Circuit of the Americas with the big old heavy stock cars, NASCAR style, from Austin, Texas. We'll see you there next time.